Hello, I'm Tom Brown. Welcome to my video series on understanding self-defense techniques. This is going to be a three-part video series where we explore several foundational concepts that are true to all martial arts systems. Now, I've been a student of the martial arts for close to 20 years, and throughout this series I want to share several ideas that I didn't come across until several years into my training. And they're incredibly powerful. They transform the way that I view the martial arts, and I think you'll find them useful. The first major idea I want to share with you, the two core pillars that all martial arts systems are built upon. Regardless of system, these two core pillars are always present. We're also going to look at what a self-defense technique is, as well as what it isn't. And in this part of the series, I'm going to share with you a concept that you can take and apply to your self-defense technique training. Now, if you don't train a system that practices self-defense techniques, perhaps you utilize forms instead or in place of self-defense techniques, you can apply the same concepts, the same ideas to your forms training as well, and I think that you'll find it to be incredibly useful. So the first idea I want to share with you is the two core pillars. Now, pillar number one, you probably already guessed, the basics. I mean, the basics are incredibly important. These are the individual movements of the system. The strikes, blocks, stances, footwork, kicks, body maneuvers, all the individual movements of the system. And regardless of rank, in some of our most advanced classes, we spend a great deal of time working on the basics. They're just that important to your development. But they're just one piece of the puzzle. There's still something missing. There's that other piece which tells you how to effectively use your basics. Have you figured out what it is? It's the concepts. These are the principles that govern motion. These are the ideas that tell you how to form your basics and how to effectively utilize them in combination with each other. And once I understood this, I never looked at a self-defense technique the same way again, because now I realized that a self-defense technique was nothing more than a vehicle through which you could extract the major and minor lessons of combat. See, a self-defense technique is simply taking the basics and combining them in a manner that abides by the concepts. And if we understand that it's just these two things put together and we arrive at our self-defense techniques, we can then take a self-defense technique and we reverse engineer it so that we can pull apart the major and minor lessons that are being taught within the technique. Now, that idea is very important, and it's one that really did transform the way that I looked at my training. And at that point, I had learned several self-defense techniques. And now, looking at them differently, and if you apply this to your training, you might discover that some of the techniques that you're learning might not abide by the concepts. See, it's important that your self-defense techniques do. Now, a self-defense technique, this is another important piece. A self-defense technique may give you a solution to a self-defense situation, but keep in mind it's not the solution. Very often, some of your more fundamental techniques can be applied to a self-defense situation, but very often the nature of a self-defense technique, learning a technique, is done in a more controlled environment, and a self-defense situation is much more spontaneous. So to go into combat under the impression that you can take and actually apply a self-defense technique is a false notion. But if you train your techniques the right way, trying to understand the movements and develop the movements that are being taught, and pulling out the lessons, and using the correct model to help you train and evolve the lessons and skills that you're learning through practicing your techniques, then you'll be able to apply the lessons of the technique. That's the ultimate aim. It's not to apply a technique. That's too restricted. Combat's far too spontaneous for that. Now what I want to share with you is a model that you can use and you can apply to your self-defense techniques that will help you to do just that. This is called the three-phase concept. It's something taught in Kempo. And it's the model that we use here at our school as we teach students their self-defense techniques. So the three-phase concept. Phase one is the ideal phase. See, we have to start in that ideal environment, that primitive state, where we explore the movements that are being taught and we try to pull out the lessons as is. We want to understand what's being shown to us. So we start here. We learn the lessons of the technique and develop the movements that are being taught within the technique. And once you can skillfully perform the technique and you understand what's going on, you have to move beyond that. Because if you don't, you're going to be stuck. You're not going to move forward. You're not going to be able to apply the lessons that you're learning from the technique. Now, phase 2 is where we start to ask a very critical question in our training, and that's what if? This is a very powerful question to ask. This is where you start to look at different variables that can be introduced or changed within the situation. Both from your opponent's perspective and from your perspective, there may be certain limitations that you bring to the situation. You might want to look at environmental variables that can change. Start asking any and all questions that you can think of. And then, of course, you're going to want to look, know where to look to find the answers, and that's something we'll explore in part 2 of the series. Now, there is a third phase, something we're not going to get into in this series, and that's the formulation phase. That's where you become a little more spontaneous in your training, but you also learn how to reformulate your techniques. And this is a very powerful, as you learn the formulation process, it's something that's very powerful. And it's something that takes a little bit more time than this series. Something that we are producing a course on at this point, and I'll let you know more about that as the course develops. At this point, what I'd like to do, now you have the three-phase concept, what I'd like to do now is share with you 2 of our very basic self-defense techniques. I have Justin over here who's going to help out, and we're going to introduce you to, first, delayed sword. It's a very basic technique. It's off a single hand lapel grab. Now, as he grabs a hold, the first movement I'm going to perform is a pinning check. I'm going to control this hand, and I'm going to try to step back before he can pull me off balance. I want to pull him off balance and try to negate his ability to throw a kick and a punch. See, if I pull this shoulder towards me, that shoulder goes away, at least for a moment. So I'm going to pin check, I'm going to step back, I'm going to chamber, and use an inward block, inward downward diagonal to strike and inflict injury into the arm. I'm going to throw a front kick, which is going to get him bent over, and set him up for my outward downward diagonal shuto or hand sword. Now you'll also notice, so all of this is going to happen in very continuous motion. But you'll also notice that our kick serves another purpose. If he's stepping in, trying to follow me in and continue attacking, my kick is going to check and control his depth so that he can't do that. So we're going to throw a kick and a chop. We'll do that one more time for you. He grabs a hold, I pin, strike, kick, and shuto. And notice too that you want to land, utilize marriage of gravity as you perform that shuto. Drop your body into it. Now our second self-defense technique is sword of destruction, and these 2 techniques have a very strong relationship with each other. Pay attention to that and start trying to pull that apart and understand that. Many times the various techniques that you learn are related to each other in various ways. So you want to notice those relationships. This is off a left roundhouse punch. As he steps in, I step back. And you'll notice I should be out of range of his attack. But I'm also going to perform an outward block for insurance purposes and to inflict injury into his weapon, because the weapon that can hurt you can also be hurt. Very important lesson. As he steps in, I step back and block. I'm going to perform a front kick and now an inward shuto. In delayed sword, we did an outward shuto, and in sword of destruction, we're going to perform an inward shuto. He throws his punch, I block, kick, and chop. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple techniques. Go to work on training them. Try to understand the lessons. Start asking what-if questions. And when we come back with part 2, we're going to take a look at a couple of places that you can look to find the answers. I'm going to share with you the role that your viewpoint plays in this whole process. And we're going to have a couple more self-defense techniques for you as well. So get to work on those techniques, and we'll see you soon.